Commander Valric Sin had always been taught that humans were merciless. They did not take prisoners, nor did they offer kindness. They were creatures of war, relentless in their pursuit of dominance. That was why, when she was captured on the battlefield, she expected nothing but a swift execution. The last thing she expected was to wake up in a dimly lit chamber, her wrists bound by energy restraints, her wounds bandaged. The air smelled of sterile metal and something oddly earthy, human surroundings. Her sharp silver eyes flicked around the room, scanning for a weakness, an escape. The walls were smooth, the door reinforced. There was no way out. Then, the door hissed open. A tall figure entered, his heavy boots echoing against the metal floor. His presence filled the room with quiet authority, but unlike the brutal human warrior she had faced, this one carried himself differently. His name was Captain Darius Voss, and he was the one responsible for her capture. Valra stiffened, expecting interrogation, maybe even torture. But Darius didn't strike her or threaten her. Instead, he set a tray of food on the table beside her. "You need to eat," he said. His voice was deep, calm, too calm for a man facing an enemy who had slaughtered his kind. Valra narrowed her eyes. "Poison." She spat, her voice hoarse from dehydration. Darius smirked. "If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have bothered keeping you alive." She didn't trust him. Silari warriors did not need human pity, nor did they need human food. But her body betrayed her, stomach twisting with hunger. Still, she refused to touch the tray, glaring at him instead. Darius sighed, leaning against the wall. "You're not what I expected." Valra's lips curled into a snarl. "Neither are you." She had imagined a brute, a savage human who would beat information out of her. Instead, this man was studying her, not just as a soldier, but as something else entirely. It unnerved her. Darius folded his arms. "Your people think we're monsters. I've fought Silari before. They fight to the death, never surrender." His piercing blue eyes locked onto hers. "Why didn't you?" Valra's chest tightened. The truth was, she had tried. She had been prepared to die on the battlefield, but fate had stolen that choice from her. She would not admit that weakness. "You think I surrendered?" She scoffed. "I was taken. There is no honor in that." Darius tilted his head. "Honor doesn't mean much when you're dead." Valra bared her sharp teeth. "To my people, it does." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Two warriors, two enemies, staring each other down. Darius didn't seem eager to break her spirit with pain. He wanted something else. Information, cooperation, perhaps something she couldn't yet understand. Then he moved closer, just enough for her to notice the faint scars along his jawline, the way his muscles tensed as if prepared for a fight at any moment. He was a soldier, like her. "I won't force you to talk," Darius finally said. "But I will offer you something your people never offered mine: mercy." Valra scoffed. "Mercy is just another word for weakness." Darius smirked again, but there was steel behind his gaze. "We'll see about that." He turned and left the room, locking the door behind him. Valra exhaled slowly, her claws flexing against the restraints. She had been ready for pain, for cruelty. But this human, this man, was doing something far worse. He was making her question everything she thought she knew. And that was far more dangerous than death. Valra sat in the cold, metallic room, her sharp eyes locked on the door. She refused to touch the food Darius had left for her. She was Silari, a warrior, a commander. She had faced death countless times, and she would rather starve than accept kindness from a human. The door hissed open again. Darius stepped inside, his expression unreadable. He carried no weapons, no restraints, just a calm confidence that unsettled her more than any blade would. "You must be thirsty," he said, setting a cup of water on the table. Valra ignored it. Darius sighed, dragging a chair across the room and sitting across from her. "You're stubborn. I'll give you that." She smirked, though there was no humor in it, and you are wasting your time. Darius leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Tell me, Valra, why did your people attack Epsilon Outpost? Valra's muscles tensed, but she kept her expression neutral. I have nothing to say. Darius studied her for a moment, then nodded as if he expected that answer. Do you know what happens to Silari prisoners? Valra's breath hitched. She had heard stories. Humans did not take prisoners, or at least, that's what she had been told. But if that were true, then why was she still alive? I imagine you will kill me eventually, she said, voice cold. Darius tilted his head slightly. If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. Valra narrowed her eyes. Then what do you want? Darius leaned back in his chair, understanding. She let out a harsh laugh. You think we will understand each other? I think we already do, he countered. You and I, we're both soldiers. We fight because we're ordered to. But tell me, Valra, do you even know why your people started this war? Valra's jaw clenched. Of course she knew. The High Council had declared that humanity was a threat to their survival. The Xilari had been raised to believe that humans were expansionists, conquerors who would not stop until every alien race bowed before them. But looking at Darius now, she hesitated. He was not what she had imagined. He was not cruel, not sadistic. He looked at her like she was something more than just an enemy. Your silence is telling, Darius said, breaking the moment. Maybe you're starting to realize that the war isn't as simple as you thought. Valra growled. You think a few words will make me betray my people. You are a fool, human. Darius chuckled, shaking his head. I don't need you to betray your people. I just need you to think. Think. That word echoed in her mind long after Darius left the room. She had been prepared for pain, for interrogation tactics designed to break her spirit, but instead he was trying to break her mind. And that, she realized, was far more dangerous than any torture could ever be. Valra sat in silence long after Darius had left. His words replayed in her mind, twisting like a knife in her chest. I just need you to think. She hated that he was making her do exactly that. For as long as she could remember, she had been told that humans were the enemy. The High Council had spoken of them as conquerors, monsters who would destroy any species that stood in their way. It had been easy to believe. After all, the humans had spread across the stars faster than any other race, establishing colonies where there had once been only silence. But now she was here, trapped in a human facility, completely at their mercy. And yet she was still alive. Not tortured, not humiliated, just spoken to. It made no sense. The door hissed open again, and her body tensed instinctively. Darius stepped inside, carrying a small device in his hand. He didn't speak at first, just pulled a chair across from her and set the device on the table. It flickered to life, displaying a holographic screen. Tell me, Valra, he said, his voice calm as ever. What do you see? The screen showed a burning battlefield. Not just any battlefield. Epsilon Outpost. She recognized the structures, the wreckage of ships, the bodies. Silari warriors and human soldiers lay scattered across the land, their weapons still clutched in cold, lifeless hands. This is what war does, Darius continued. This is what we fight for. But tell me, do you see conquerors here? Valra clenched her jaw. War always has casualties. Yes, Darius agreed, nodding. But not all wars are the same. Your people say we are the aggressors, that we want to wipe out the Xilari. His blue eyes met hers, unblinking. Then why are we the ones defending? Valra stiffened. Lies. Darius didn't argue. Instead, he pressed another button, and the image changed. Now it showed a Xilari command hall, one she recognized. It was the same one where she had stood before leaving for battle, the High Council chamber. Her heart pounded as she watched her own leaders speaking in hushed voices. The recording was grainy, distorted, but she could still hear their words. The humans have not attacked first, but it does not matter. We cannot wait for them to grow stronger. We must strike before they do. But the treaty, one voice protested, means nothing. Another growled. Do you think they will honor it forever? They are expanding. If we do not move now, we will be the ones at their mercy. The recording ended. Silence hung in the air like a blade about to drop. Valra's breath was shallow. This was impossible. The High Council had said that the humans were the ones who had broken the treaty, that they had attacked first, but the recording said otherwise. She looked up at Darius, her silver eyes burning with suspicion. Where did you get this? From a Xelari defector, he said simply. Someone who wanted the truth to be known. Valra's claws dug into her palms. She refused to believe it. This had to be some human trick, a fabrication. The humans had every reason to spread false information, to weaken the Xelari from the inside. But why did it feel real? Darius leaned back in his chair, watching her closely. He didn't press her, didn't demand she believe him. He was simply waiting, letting the truth settle. I don't expect you to trust me, he finally said, but I do expect you to question what you've been told. Then, without another word, he stood and left. Valra remained seated, staring at the now dark screen. For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure what to believe. And that terrified her. Valra sat in the dimly lit cell, her mind in turmoil. The recording played over and over in her head, every word from the High Council striking her like a dagger. The humans have not attacked first, but it does not matter. We must strike before they do. She wanted to dismiss it as a human trick, a carefully crafted lie to weaken her resolve. But something inside her hesitated. It felt too real, too precise. The voices in the recording belonged to people she had followed without question, leaders she had trusted with her life. Her claws dug into her palms as frustration burned in her chest. If the humans had faked the recording, why hadn't Darius pressed her to believe it? Why had he left the decision in her hands? The door hissed open again. She snapped her head up, expecting Darius. But instead, another human entered. A woman this time. She had dark hair tied back and a scar running across her cheek, a sign of past battles. Lieutenant Darius requested I bring you something, the woman said, setting a tray of food and water on the table. You haven't eaten since you got here. Valra narrowed her eyes. Do you expect me to be grateful? The woman smirked. No, I expect you to be smart enough to keep up your strength. She crossed her arms, studying Valra. I'm Lieutenant Karavos, by the way. You're Valra, right? Valra didn't answer. Kara chuckled. Yeah, figured you wouldn't be talkative. You Xelari are all the same, stubborn to the end. Valra's lips curled into a snarl. You humans think you know us. I know enough, Kara said, leaning against the wall. I know you believe everything your council tells you. I know you think we're monsters. She shook her head. I used to think the same way about your kind. Valra's eyes narrowed. And now? Now I think war makes fools of us all, Kara said simply. The words caught Valra off guard. There was no arrogance, no mocking. Just exhaustion, a weariness Valra recognized because she felt it, too. Kara exhaled and pushed off the wall. Eat, don't eat. That's up to you. She turned to leave but paused at the door. But you might want to consider something. If we were really the monsters your people claim we are, would we be treating you like this? With that, she left. Valra stared at the tray of food, her mind spinning. Her whole life, she had been told that humans were incapable of mercy, that they took no prisoners, that surrender meant death. But she was here, alive, being given food instead of torture. Was it a trick, a slow, careful way to break her? Or had she been lied to? The thought made her stomach twist. For so long, she had believed in her cause, in the righteousness of the Xelari war effort. But if the humans were telling the truth, if her people had started this war without cause, she clenched her fists. She wasn't ready to believe them. Not yet. But she was no longer certain she believed her own people either. And that uncertainty scared her more than any human ever could. Valera sat in silence, staring at the untouched tray of food. Her hunger gnawed at her, but her mind refused to let her eat. She had been trained to resist enemy tricks, to withstand psychological warfare. But was this really a trick? If the humans wanted to break her, why were they treating her with such patience? Why wasn't she in chains, suffering as she had always been told prisoners would? She exhaled sharply and pushed the tray aside. She needed answers. The door opened once more, and this time, Darius returned. He carried a datapad in his hand, his expression unreadable. He pulled the chair across from her and sat down. "Have you thought about what I showed you?" he asked. Valera glared at him. "I don't trust anything that comes from a human's mouth." Darius leaned back, sighing. "I expected that. But let me ask you something, Valera. If you had captured me instead, what would have happened?" She didn't answer. She knew the truth. If the situation were reversed, Darius wouldn't be sitting in a cell with warm food. He would be interrogated, broken, maybe even executed. Her silence was answer enough. Darius nodded. "You know how your people treat prisoners. Yet here you are, sitting, unharmed, being given a chance to think. Doesn't that tell you something?" Valera hated how calm he was, how he didn't raise his voice or threaten her. She wanted him to be cruel, to justify her hatred, but he wasn't, and that made everything worse. She folded her arms. "You think showing me a recording will make me turn against my people?" Darius studied her for a moment. "I don't expect you to betray them. I just want you to see the truth." He tapped the datapad, and another hologram appeared. This time, it wasn't war footage. It was a colony, a human colony, or at least, what was left of it. Buildings lay in ruins, smoke curling into the sky. Bodies, men, women, children, were scattered in the wreckage. The auxiliary flag was stamped into the ground, a symbol of conquest. Valera's stomach twisted. "This was Haven 4, Darius said, his voice quieter. "A peaceful settlement. No military presence, no weapons, just families trying to build a new home." Valera's claws dug into her palms. She had been told that every human colony was a military base, a staging ground for war. But this was a tactical strike, she muttered, as if saying it aloud would make it true. Darius shook his head. This was a massacre. Valera's heart pounded. She wanted to deny it, to call it propaganda. But the images were right there, too raw, too real. Darius set the datapad down. "Your people aren't evil, Valera. I know that. I've fought Siluri soldiers who were just following orders, just like you. But the people leading your war, they don't care about honor or justice. They care about power. And they'll do anything to keep it." She clenched her fists. For the first time, she wasn't just questioning. She was afraid of the answers. Valera paced the length of her cell, her thoughts a whirlwind of conflict. Every instinct told her to hold on to her loyalty, to reject everything the humans had shown her. But the images wouldn't leave her mind. The burned colony, the lifeless bodies, the Siluri banner planted in the ashes. Could it really be true? Had her people been the aggressors all along? She turned sharply as the door slid open. Darius entered again, his expression unreadable. He didn't bring a datapad this time, no more recordings or proof. He just watched her. "You haven't eaten," he said, nodding toward the untouched tray. Valera scoffed. "You expect me to have an appetite after what you showed me?" Darius shrugged. "I expected you to be angry. I am." She clenched her fists. "I just don't know who I'm angry at." Darius walked to the opposite wall and leaned against it. "You're not the first Siluri to feel that way." Valera narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" Darius hesitated, then sighed. "You think you're alone in this, that no Siluri has ever questioned the war." Valera tensed. "You're lying. Am I? Darius pushed off the wall. You know about Commander Jorek Vel. Valra stiffened at the name. Jorek Vel had been a high-ranking Silari officer, a brilliant strategist. Then he had vanished. The official story was that humans had captured and executed him. Darius smirked as he read her expression. He's not dead, Valra. He defected. The words struck like a thunderbolt. No, he wouldn't. He did, Darius cut in. Because he saw the truth, just like you're starting to. Valra shook her head. If that were true, my people would have branded him a traitor, buried his name. That's exactly what they did. She wanted to argue, to refute him, but she couldn't. The Xilari were proud, but they had their secrets. And the more she thought about it, the more Jorek Vel's mysterious disappearance seemed suspicious. Darius sat down, his voice calmer. You're a soldier, Valra. You were raised to follow orders. But what happens when those orders go against everything you believe in? Valra took a shaky breath. I don't know anymore. Darius didn't press her. He just let the silence stretch. And in that silence, something inside Valra cracked. For the first time, she admitted to herself that the war might not be what she had believed. But what did that mean for her? Could she ever go back? Would she even want to? Her claws twitched, her body tense with the weight of uncertainty. For so long, she had seen humans as the enemy. But now, sitting in a human cell, facing a man who had shown her nothing but patience, she wondered, had the real enemy always been behind her? Valra sat on the cold metal bench, staring at the floor. Her mind felt like a battlefield, torn between everything she had been taught and everything she had seen. The name Jorek Vel haunted her thoughts. If what Darius said was true, then her people had lied, not just to her, but to every Silari soldier. The door slid open, and Darius entered, this time carrying no weapons, no datapads, just a look of quiet understanding. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he placed a small holo device on the table and activated it. A familiar voice filled the room. Jorek Vel. Valra's breath caught. If you are hearing this, then you are like me. A soldier who has started to question. I was once loyal, just as you are. I fought for the Xilari Empire without hesitation. But then I saw what they hid from us. The truth. We were never fighting for honor. We were fighting for the ambitions of those who sit in towers, untouched by war. We were told humans were monsters, but I have seen their kindness, their mercy, and I have seen our own cruelty. If you are hearing this, it is not too late to choose. The recording ended. Silence filled the room. Valra clenched her fists. Why are you showing me this? Because I think you already know the truth, Darius said. You just need to decide what you'll do about it. She exhaled sharply, pushing back against the emotions threatening to consume her. Even if I believe you, even if I accepted all of this, what do you expect me to do? Walk away? Betray my people? Darius sat across from her, his gaze steady. I don't expect anything, but I won't lie to you. If you choose to go back, they'll either kill you or force you to forget what you've seen. You know too much now. Valra swallowed hard. He was right. There was no going back. But joining the humans, that was unthinkable, wasn't it? Jorek Vel, she murmured. Where is he now? Darius hesitated. He leads a resistance. Silari defectors, humans, anyone who sees the truth and wants to stop the war before it destroys everything. Valra's claws tapped against the table. He fights against my people. He fights for peace, Darius corrected. Your people aren't the enemy. The ones controlling them are. She shut her eyes for a moment. This was treason. She had spent her whole life believing that loyalty was the greatest honor Xilari could have. But loyalty to what? A cause built on lies. Why do you care so much about what I decide? She asked, opening her eyes. Darius smirked. Because I think you're more than just a soldier. and because I know what it's like to question everything you've ever known." Valra studied him. He wasn't just trying to recruit her. He genuinely wanted her to see the truth and make her own choice. And that scared her more than anything. Because she knew, deep down, she had already made her decision. She wasn't going back. Valra sat in silence for what felt like hours. Her whole life had been built on loyalty, duty, and honor. But now, those things felt like chains, forged by a lie she had once believed without question. She thought of the young Silari recruits who had looked up to her, the soldiers who had fought beside her, trusting that their leaders were guiding them toward a righteous cause. Had she been leading them to their deaths for nothing? Darius waited, saying nothing. He had given her space, allowing her to think, to process everything. There was no pressure in his stance, no demand in his eyes. He wasn't trying to force her into anything. He was waiting for her to choose. And she had. Finally, she stood up. Her sharp golden eyes locked onto his. "I want to speak to Jorik Vel." Darius raised an eyebrow, but didn't look surprised. He picked up his communicator and spoke into it. "She's ready." Within minutes, the doors opened and 2 human officers entered, flanking a hooded figure. The moment the figure stepped into the light, Valra's breath caught. Jorik Vel. His presence was commanding, even after years in exile. His silver-gray scales bore scars of past battles, but his eyes were sharp, focused. This was not a defeated soldier. This was a warrior who had found a new purpose. "Valra," he greeted, his voice steady. "I wondered if I would ever see another Silari walk this path." Valra straightened. "I need to know. Why did you leave?" Jorik's gaze was unwavering. "Because I saw the truth, just as you have." She hesitated, then asked the question burning inside her. "And what happens now?" Jorik glanced at Darius before turning back to her. "That depends on you." The room fell silent for a moment. Then Jorik spoke again. "We fight, Valra, not to destroy our people, but to free them. The Exilari Empire thrives on control, on keeping its soldiers blind and obedient. But what happens when we open their eyes?" Valra inhaled sharply. "They'll see what I saw." Jorik nodded. "Exactly." She clenched her fists. "Then we need to act fast. If they realize I'm missing, they'll assume the worst. And if they think I've defected, they'll hunt you," Darius finished. "They'll send everything they have to silence you." Valra smirked. "Then we should make sure their first move is their last mistake." Jorik's lips curled into something resembling a smile. "You think like a warrior. That will serve you well." Darius crossed his arms. "We have a ship waiting. If you're serious about this, we leave tonight." Valra nodded. There was no hesitation now. She had made her decision, and there was no turning back. For the first time in her life, she wasn't following orders. She was choosing her own path. And she would make sure the Exilari Empire regretted ever lying to her. Valra stood at the edge of the docking bay, staring at the vastness of space before her. The Exilari Empire had once felt unbreakable, like a force that could never be challenged. But now, for the first time, she saw the cracks in its foundation. They had built their strength on lies, and lies could only hold for so long before they crumbled. Behind her, Jorik Vel and Darius prepared the ship. It was an older model, built for stealth rather than combat, but that suited their mission perfectly. They weren't here to fight a war. Not yet. They were here to strike where it mattered. Darius approached her, checking his sidearm as he spoke. "You sure about this?" Valra turned to him, her expression unreadable. "More than I've ever been." Darius smirked. "That's what I like to hear." Jorik joined them, his sharp golden eyes surveying the ship. "We move fast. We plant the evidence, expose the truth, and leave before they realize what happened." The plan was simple but dangerous. They weren't attacking the Empire directly. Instead, they were infiltrating one of its most secure data hubs, the Citadel of Dominion, and broadcasting proof of its corruption across every major Silari-controlled system. If they succeeded, millions of Silari would see the truth, and once the truth was out, the Empire wouldn't be able to silence it. The ship took off, slipping into the black void of space. As they neared the Citadel, alarms rang inside the cockpit. "They've spotted us," Darius muttered, adjusting the ship's trajectory. "Good," Valra said. "Let them watch. They won't realize the real threat until it's too late." Jork activated the ship's stealth systems, masking their presence just as they reached the outer docking ring of the Citadel. The security drones scanned the area, but saw nothing. The Empire had built its defenses for war, not for deception. They slipped inside. The hallways were cold and sterile, pulsing with artificial light. Valra moved ahead, her senses sharp, her claws flexing at her sides. This was enemy territory, or at least it had been. A squad of Silari guards patrolled ahead. Valra hesitated. She had fought beside soldiers just like them. But today, she wasn't their ally. She was their enemy. Jork motioned for her to stay low. Darius pulled out a small device, overriding the security systems. The doors hissed open, leading them deeper into the Citadel. Inside the control room, Jork moved fast, plugging in the data drive. The screens flickered as the truth was unleashed. A flood of classified reports, hidden orders, and proof of the Empire's lies. Every Silari across the galaxy would see this. There would be no more hiding. Then the alarms blared. "They know we're here," Darius said, drawing his weapon. "Then we leave," Valra ordered. The escape was chaos. The corridors erupted in gunfire, but Valra moved like a storm, cutting down anyone who tried to stop them. She wasn't fighting for the Empire anymore. She was fighting to end it. They reached the ship, launching into space as the Citadel's defenses activated. But it was too late for the Empire. The truth was already out. Valra exhaled, staring at the stars. The real war was just beginning. And this time, she was fighting for something real.